All right, part two, Western Conference NHL 2022-23 season standing predictions. It's a mouthful. Again, we're at the halfway point, so I figured it'd be fun to kind of predict who's going to make playoffs and who's going to finish where in the standings. Obviously, there's still a lot to happen throughout the regular season, including things like the trade deadline and perhaps major injuries happen. Um, we'll see. These things are tough to predict at this point in the year, but the playoff picture starts to come together, so you can kind of make a decent prediction. But nonetheless, take it with a grain of salt. This is just for fun. These are just my predictions based on stats and all that fun stuff. If you watched the last video, now you know why I'm wearing a Kraken and Golden Knights jersey. Kraken hat, Golden Knights jersey. Kraken Golden Knights. We'll discuss that. Because that's an interesting conversation. Starting off in the Central, I have the Jets taking the division. Take your pick between the Jets and the Stars. The Jets have played one less game and are 1 point behind the Stars in that division. They're very similar in terms of offense and defensive production, which surprised me. I thought the Jets' offense wasn't as potent as the Stars, and the Stars' defense wasn't as potent as the Jets. But they're a lot closer than I thought, so that was interesting. I took the Jets over the Stars because of their defensive structure. They have a very solid defensive structure, and they have Connor Hellebuck in net. And I'm not here to root against Hellebuck, but then again, you can also take the Stars, and really just based on Robertson, you really shouldn't count against Robertson. Dude is an animal. So take your pick. I had the Jets edging out the Stars. I think it's going to be really close. If you want to pick the Stars, I'm not going to be, you're not going to get an argument from me. Both teams have a very good case why they should be number one and win the division. It's exciting to see who will. Next up, I got the Wild in third place. Joel Eriksson Ek had a head injury last game. If he's out long term, that's going to hurt quite a bit. He's one of the main offensive point producers at this point. For the Wild, he's also incredible defensively. He's an incredible defensive centerman. Really should be in the Selke voting. Should be, I'd have him as a Selke finalist this year. I would have had him last year too, honestly. He was outstanding. That dude that'll be a big loss if they lose him, which could hurt. But nonetheless, I don't think they're playing at the level of the Jets or Stars. Yes, they've been hot this last month. Yes, I'm a Wild fan. I watch every game. But I think they're still handily going to be in front of the Avalanche. I don't know. I'd say there's probably like a 12 point difference between the Stars and Avalanche. And I think the Wild are within 5 points of each. So it's my thoughts so far. Gustafsson will have an opportunity to be the starter for the Wild this upcoming week. Can he solidify himself as the starter of the Wild? Maybe he'll be the 1A goaltender and Fleury will turn into the 1B goaltender. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Wild and their goaltending. But nonetheless, they have a very solid team top to bottom. They have rookies coming in and producing at a decent rate. They're stepping right in and filling these roles that need to be filled. So I think the Wild have done a very good job with cap management because the Parise and Suter almost $13 million cap hit starts this year. I think it's like 12.7 this year, and it's 14.7 next year. So there's that. So it's cool they're in the playoff talk. Anyway, Avalanche. Yes, they've been injured all year. They've had injury issues all year. We don't know if that's going to continue. Hopefully not. McKinnon should be back anytime soon. I think he's already. I don't know. Clearly, the Avalanche are just kind of doing their thing. Whatever. I haven't watched the Avalanche in a few weeks, so fine. They still don't have a second line center though. They need a second line center. We saw the Bruins really struggle with that issue last year, not having a second line center. It really hurts your offense, especially this day and age in the NHL where it's a more offensive-based league. You need two lines that can score at a pretty decent clip. You should have a point producer, should in italics or quotation marks, have a point per game producer on at least two lines to be a competitive and playoff team. We'll see. The Wild don't have that, but they also have productions through 3 lines. They have multiple 20-goal scorers on at least 3 lines. Um, so we'll see. I have questions about the Avalanche. I have questions about if Georgiev is going. I think this is his first season as a starter. Will he remain as solid as he has been throughout the remainder of the year? Is he going to be the guy in the playoffs? Is Francouz going to be the guy in the playoffs? Because Francouz has played well in the playoffs. But Georgiev seems to be the starter at this point. So there are still questions. I'm not too worried about it. I think the Avalanche will make the playoffs. Won't be an issue making the playoffs. Because the next team up is the Predators, and the Predators are the definition of mediocre. They've been a mediocre team for years and years. They've been right in the middle of the pack. There have been a few years where they've had playoff success, but most years they're a first round exit. It's the Predators. You know what you're going to get with them. You're going to get good goaltending dating back years. You're going to get good defense dating back years, and you're going to get a physical team dating back years. It's how the Predators have been built for years and years and years. But they're really, really struggling to score this year. You got guys like Forsberg and Johansson and Duchesne scoring less than they were last year, which we kind of anticipated. Nino Niederreiter's been a pleasant addition to that team in terms of scoring, but it's kind of, scoring is kind of hard to come by if you're wearing a Predators uniform. So it's kind of their issue. Good defensive team, but, they need offense, and they don't have offense. They get offense, things may change, and that's why there was a lot of hype around them last year, because they had the offense, because these guys were scoring, all having career years. So we'll see. I don't have them making the playoffs this year, but I do have them jumping over the Blues. I think this is going to be the normal for the Blues for the rest of the season. Really, because in my eyes, they don't have a goaltender. They don't have a number one. You have Greiss, who's a backup, who's been playing decently. You have Binnington, who has had some good games, but every time he has a good game, it seems to be followed up with like 4 or 5 consecutive not so good games. Save percentage below 900, as he did last year. Yeah, man. Big question in my eyes is the goaltending. The defense has looked a little suspect this year. Beginning of the year, I was like, I'm not too worried about it. Berube's the coach. He's good at getting his team to buy into team defense play. Hasn't necessarily been the case this year, so I'm a little concerned. Halfway through the season, there's still a defensive concern with a defensive-oriented coach. What are we going to start seeing? So I don't know. I think this is about it for the Blues. They'll probably be back next year. They'll probably bounce back. But there's a lot of issues with the defense and the goaltending right now that I can't see past. So at least they're in front of the Coyotes and the Blackhawks, though. Coyotes, they're winning some games. They're not. They're not great. They're rebuilding, but you got guys like Vemelka and Shane Gostisbehere, and you got some players that are producing and making it tough for management to get that first overall pick, which is fun. But you got the Blackhawks who are just playing some brutal hockey right now. Stalock in net has been a bright spot. I think he's like, his save percentage is like 920 or something crazy. So Blackhawks, not so much brightness there, but at least Stalock's producing well. They still have Patrick Kane and Taves. See if anything happens with that. Probably should around the trade deadline, but we'll see. Anyway, Pacific Division, Golden Knights. I'm not too concerned with the Golden Knights falling off. I did have them missing the playoffs at the beginning of the year. I was worried about their offensive production, especially with Bruce Cassidy coming in. Bruce Cassidy is a defensive-minded coach who expects his defensemen to step up in the offensive zone and provide some offensive production, but that usually leaves holes in the defense, and then he's got a weird coaching style, and I'm not mad about it because it works, but it's just, I wasn't quite sure how that was going to mesh with the Golden Knights. seems to work out great. It seems to have paid off. Logan Thompson playing hockey in net. He's looked decent. Questions I had at the beginning of the season seem to have been answered. And yeah, their stats are good on both ends of the ice. Unless they figure out how to stop scoring goals, I don't see them losing that first overall spot. My last year, the last few months, they really had issues scoring goals. Even with Jack Eichel back, even with pretty much the same team. So I was a little concerned about their goal scoring coming into this year, and it hasn't been an issue. It hasn't. They've scored goals. Even losing Pacioretty, 30 goal scorer, that's fine. They're not really struggling to score goals at the moment. So, Golden Knights, I have them first overall. Second, Seattle. The two expansion teams I'm predicting to finish first and second in the standings in the Pacific, and they meet next year for the Winter Classic. It's great. The Kraken, their stats have actually been excellent throughout the season. They're scoring, they're defending. There's still some questions in net, but they're winning games with questionable goaltending. They're doing it. I don't know. I don't know, but whatever they're doing seems sustainable, and you could see flashes of what they're doing this year in almost every game last year, and now they put it together for a full 60 minutes, it seems, on most nights, which is getting them victories. The Kraken weren't bad last year. They couldn't play a whole 60-minute game, playing the game they wanted to play. There was always some issue, right? There's always a breakdown in defense for like the second period or something. I watched a lot of Kraken's games last year. Watched a fair amount this year. They're not doing a whole lot different, to be honest. They're just playing more 60-minute hockey games instead of 20 and 40-minute hockey games. So it's encouraging to see. I don't think they're going to go far in the playoffs or anything, but I do have them finishing second. And the way they played this year so far and the way they played last year, that's kind of transitioned into their winning record this year. It's encouraging. I picked the Kraken to also miss the playoffs this year. So first two teams I had making the playoffs halfway through the season. I had missing the playoffs entirely to start the season. So unique, weird, but let's get into the next team, the Kings. I had the Kings finishing third. Originally, I had them finishing first in the Pacific, but it's kind of one of those crapshoot things. There's a lot of teams that could be there, but you can make a case for any team. The Kings, my biggest gripe with them is their goaltending. Quick and Peterson both have not been playing at a caliber of a number one goaltender. It's not even a 1A, 1B scenario. It's both guys are struggling in net. You know what you're going to get with Quick. Probably shouldn't be the starter at this point. Probably shouldn't have been the starter the past few years, but they haven't had any really better option. Peterson's had points where he's looked great and should be the starter, and he's had some pretty brutal stretches of hockey. The defense isn't playing at an elite level, but for me, it's really the goaltending's really letting them down over there. And I don't like to speak too ill of goaltenders without throwing some shade at the defense, but this is the goaltending's it's kind of brutal in LA. So there's that. The offense is fine. They're a good team. They got a lot of young guys that are stepping in the lineup and looking good. I think they'll make the playoffs. I don't think it'll be too much of an issue making the playoffs, but there are some questions when it comes to how many goals they give up. Flames, they're getting it together. They're starting to figure it out. It looks like Huberdeau's starting to fit in and produce on a nightly basis. Uyghur's starting to figure out his defensive play on that blue line in conjunction with the system the Flames play. The defensive play in Florida that Uyghur played in is very different from Sutter's play in Calgary with the Flames. Some players that can take some time to transition to that, and I think Uyghur is figuring it out. Kadri producing great as a second line center. I'm not a big fan of Kadri on the ice. I'm not a fan of a lot of players on the ice. Off the ice is a different story, but on the ice, you know, I'm a Bruins fan, and the number of dirty plays he's had in the playoffs against the Bruins is it's a lot. But man, he is one of the best second line centers in the league. There's no doubt about that, and he's proven that yet again. He's proven that last year wasn't some fluke. Um, he's not only putting up the points, but he's good defensively as well, and the Flames are really benefiting from that, and that's something they really needed coming into this year was a solid second line center, some stability at that position, and they have it, and they have it for the long term. So, Flames, I have edging out the Oilers. So, you know, man, the Oilers with me, it's their defense. Their defense is atrocious. Um, it's brutal to watch. You have a guy like Stuart Skinner coming in, playing pretty decent hockey as a goaltender, because Campbell hasn't been playing all that well. You know, it is what it is. Um, but the defense isn't doing the goaltending any favors by any means. There's a lot of high scoring chances against their goaltenders. There's just, the team isn't playing good team defense, but the defensemen are also not playing good defense at all. Darnell Nurse is decent on defense. He has shifts where he shows flashes of being an elite defensive defenseman. And then the next shift he'll come up and make some ridiculous. He'll just do something ridiculous that will just I don't know, lead to a goal. It's just an NHL caliber shouldn't make those types of plays type thing. So I like Nurse. I know he gets a lot of hate. I think he's still a very good defensive player, or defensive D-man. He provides some offense. Provides a fair amount of offense. But you also got guys like Tyson Barrie, who is a defensive liability, and there's a lot of questions with their defense. And Evander Kane being out for as long as he has been and will continue to be, it really hurts their offense as well. The Oilers, I think, will still be in the thick of it and still make a case for a playoff spot. I think it's going to be really the Flames and Oilers vying for that last spot. The Oilers, if a game's going to be played on special teams, at least the power play, the Oilers are in a good shot to win that game because you have both McDavid and Draisaitl on the ice for 2 minutes consistently, not to mention guys like Nugent Hopkins and all that. So their offense is fine. They got two of the best shooters in the world. McDavid plays probably one of their best defensive forwards at this point. I don't want to say best because there are better defensive forwards on that team, but McDavid is playing a fair amount of defense and compared to some of the other forwards on that team, which is concerning. It's great for McDavid. It just shows how complete of a player he is, but usually your top point producer, most top point producers on teams don't play a whole lot of defense. Case in point, David Pastrnak doesn't play defense this year. Come at me. I'm a Bruins fan. I watch every game. His defense has been horrible this year. It's been awful. He doesn't play defense this year. So I think that speaks volumes to McDavid and the type of player he is. But the rest of the team needs to follow suit and follow McDavid's on-ice leadership. He's leading by example. The rest of the team needs to follow suit with that and play good team defense, and they're not. And that's a huge concern. Even with Stuart Skinner's decent goaltending numbers, it's still a concern. They're letting in too many shots. Too many goals are going in. They need to figure that out. But that's been an ongoing issue for years with the Oilers. It's not anything new. I think a lot of blame gets placed on the goaltenders when in reality, there's a lot of issues with that defense that really needs to be shored up. Goalies' numbers typically are good when the defense in front of them is good. There's a direct correlation there. Yeah. Anyway, Canucks are doing Canuck things. I don't think they're going to be near the playoffs mark at all. I don't think they're going to be near last place at all. I think they're going to be right in the middle. They got a decent team. There's no defense with that team. That's just a team that tries to play offense with every shift and isn't overly successful at it. They have some offensive weapons. They're good. They're pretty good offensively, but their defensive players focus too much on playing offense mostly because they're offensive defensemen, and that's why they have a job in the NHL. But so no shade throwing at those types of players. But it's weird because you got a guy like Bruce Boudreau who likes to play a defensive hockey, or he likes to his coaching style is structured more towards defense than it is offense. Um, so it's interesting, but you got plenty of guys in that forward group who will do the bare minimum in their own defensive zone. You got plenty of defensive players on that team that are there to play offense, not necessarily defense. It's just they're brutal to watch. They can score goals, but that's about it. Their goaltending is like a whole nother thing that's going on right now. I'm not gonna. I can go down a rabbit hole on the Canucks. I'm not gonna do that in this video because we're already well over 20 minutes. But the Canucks are the Canucks. They're not the worst team in the league, but they're definitely not a playoff team. I'd say they're about right in the middle of that. I think they're about there in the standings currently. I think they'll kind of remain there in the standings. The Sharks, I have them finishing above the Ducks because the Ducks are that bad. I got a lot of hate when I came out with my original predictions for this year because I had the Sharks above the Ducks. The Ducks got rid of players like, Hampus Lindholm and, Getzlaf retired and, Raquel gets traded and they lose a lot of key guys. They don't qualify guys like Sam Steele or Sonny Milano. And then they come in and replace these guys with like John Klingberg and Kulikov. And Kulikov last year was a depth defenseman. He was versatile, so he was put into the lineup because he can play right and left defense. But he was a defensive liability for the Wild last year. And admittedly, I haven't watched Kulikov this year. His stats on paper are fine. They're not as bad as if you watch him night in night out, you'd expect his stats to be a lot worse. But you're replacing a guy like Raquel with a third liner and Frank Vetrano. Strome was a good pickup. I like Strome, but at the same time, who is he? Is he supposed to replace Getzlaf? Because that's not a comparable replacement. Getzlaf with his physicality and his leadership and his vision was absurd. And I'm a Getzlaf hater, but that's a tough guy to replace in Strome. Huge fan of Strome. I love Strome. He is not the replacement for Getzlaf. And the Sharks, they have a lot of contracts that are top heavy, but they have guys that will produce. Erik Karlsson can put the puck in the net. They have Timo Meier and Hurdle. They have guys that can play hockey. Maybe they're definitely not a playoff team or like going to be near a playoff team. They're definitely not a good team, but I feel like they have more quality players than the Ducks at this point. The Ducks, you have Troy Terry, who is just an animal, and you have Zegras, who is Zegras. He's pretty good. He's young. So, yeah. The Ducks, no surprise, they're just solidly in last. Their goal differentials, incredibly horrible. I feel for Ducks fans because it feels like they've just been in this hole for years, and they draft these young players and then they don't qualify them, or they get traded, or whatever happens, and they're just in last place every year. And I feel for Ducks fans, and Sabres fans especially, Senators fans as well. Like, it's been a brutal go around. So I feel for you guys. I'm rooting for you. But yeah, they just do not have a good team, especially last night's Ducks Bruins game. It's like the Ducks looked like an AHL team. They didn't look like an NHL team. They were brutal to watch, and that's not just to say the Ducks are bad, because there are other teams that have looked pretty awful too. But it's not like the Ducks weren't trying or playing poorly. The skill level was just it was just night and day compared to the Bruins. The Ducks I still have finishing in last, and I don't see them finishing any higher. So I'm sorry, Ducks fans. I'm sorry. It is what it is. I'm rooting for you guys though. I'm rooting for the Sharks too, man. Both those teams could move up. That'd be great. Canucks, Oilers, whatever. Flames, But man, it's been a rough go about for the Sharks and Ducks lately. So we'll see. Again, this is just fun. I don't know, mostly based on stats. Not putting any bias into these because like it's just for fun. Doesn't really, it could be right, it could be wrong. More of a statistical analysis. So we'll see what happens. If these are wrong, feel free to come at me hard at the end of the season. Be like, dude, this is terrible. Don't do this again, because that would be pretty great. But I'm pretty confident in these for the most part. Obviously, there's gonna be caveats like the Stars may finish ahead, or maybe an injury happens. Maybe like Kaprizov gets hurt on the Wild and the Avalanche jump the Wild. Things like that may happen. It's just unpredictable, but for the most part, the way we're going this season, I'm pretty confident in the Eastern Western Conference predictions. Let me know what you guys think. Who do you have makes the playoffs? Who do you guys have missing the playoffs? Do you have the Oilers making the playoffs? I feel like I'm probably in the minority with the Oilers missing the playoffs. But who do you have falling out of the playoffs? Do you have the Kraken falling out of the playoffs because they're an expansion team? Do you have the Kings falling out of the playoffs because their goal differential isn't great and their defense play has been they've been letting a lot of goals in their net? Do you have the Oilers just beating the Flames to make the playoffs? Do you have the Flames not making the playoffs? What's going on? Let me know. It's fun times. But yeah, 26 and a half minutes. Wow, I need to figure out how to shorten these videos up. I appreciate you guys watching if you stuck it out. Let me know if you had any questions. Thanks for watching, and take care.